Man, watching that video gives me chills and just makes me want to go back to summer camp. I was so excited to get to show you that today. Anyways, good morning to each of you. If we haven't met yet, my name is Casey Stringer. Thanks. I wasn't expecting that. That's new. But my name is Casey Stringer, and if you couldn't tell by the video or the fact that I'm preaching in a coat and t-shirt, I'm the youth minister here at Northwest. And if you see some blue shirts out around tonight or this morning, we've got our camp shirts on feature today. And so we're very excited to celebrate Camp Sunday with you this morning, where we get to share a little bit about what we experienced last week at Central Florida Bible Camp. But like I said, I'm the youth minister here at Northwest, and if you couldn't tell, I have the greatest job on earth. I've said that from this stage before, and I'm happy to say it again, because I get to spend the year, each year, all year, working with the young folks at our church, which heavily populate this section right up here. I get to spend a lot of my time with them, and every day of the year, it is a blessing beyond words. They uplift me, they teach me, they help me grow in my faith, all while we're trying to provide a space for them to have those same things and have those same experiences. And so it's a really, really beautiful year to walk through when I'm working with the teenagers, because I truly believe that our young people are walking examples of fruit of the Spirit. Because above all else, they are fun, and they're funny, and they're bright, and they're loving, and they're caring, and so many other things. So getting to spend the year with them is great. Which is why, even though I'm blessed by them year-round, I'm especially blessed one specific week of the year when we go to camp. Because in a week of camp, we get to experience all of the beautiful things about God, about faith, about youth group, and the joy of other people. And I'm very ready to share some of that with you today. So, yes, today is Camp Sunday, where you get to hear about camp and what it means to our youth group and all those things. But in the process, our kids are going to teach you something about faith this morning. They will. So because of that, I'm excited for today's lesson, and it is a lesson. We're going to talk about the things and we did and we learned, but within that, God has a message for all of us about the type of life that we should be striving for, and the type of church that we should be striving for. And so I'm excited about that this morning. This year at camp, at Central Florida Bible Camp, our theme was Re-emerge. Every year, camp has a theme that it takes on, and if you've seen our camp shirts, we didn't pick that theme based on a Bigfoot re-emergence. We were thinking through, and we studied through the lens of what we've all been through this past year and all the different things that we've gone through, and we studied that through the lens of looking at Moses and looking at God through Moses. See, because I know we all know that the pandemic has taken all kinds of tolls on our normal lives. I mean, it's hard to go a Sunday without talking about that to some degree. And some days it feels like everything is different and things are not going to go back to the same or whatever it may be. But it took a serious toll on young people in this country. And I know that we know that. But I really want to emphasize that to you this morning, because I've got to spend the last year and a half seeing the effect that it had on young people here, and especially the teenagers at our church. See, if you ask our teens, what was this last year like for you, or something along those lines, many would say the past year was a darker time in life, maybe even their darkest time that they've experienced in life so far, filled with really, really difficult things. And I try to advocate that what teens experience, what the difficulties they experience, are very grown up. They're not trivial things. And so this past year, if you ask them, they would say they struggle with things like mental health struggles, learning how to do virtual school, which is no small thing, and above all, being away from friends. I mean, that's an age where you are around a lot of people all the time, your age. And so being away from that took a toll on a lot of young people in our country and in our youth group. And it affected us all kinds of ways, especially in the youth group. Like last summer, we were forced to be away from each other pretty much the whole summer. And that's a very sharp turn from how things usually go for teenagers at this church. Usually in the summer, we as a youth group spend countless hours together doing all kinds of different things, like serving and going on trips and growing on our faith, but ultimately growing closer to one another, learning how to follow God better. That's what we devote our summers to in the youth group. So that sharp change last summer, where everything was virtual all of a sudden, including the change of missing camp for the first time in decades at this church, had a deep effect on us. So we went into this year's camp ready for something different. And this is the framework we were looking at things at. We were ready for a shift, ready for a summer together. And we were excited about it. And that's where this idea of re-emerge came from as our theme to talk about for camp. Like, we've been in this season of darkness, and each of us wants to see the light of God in a new way as we come out of this season. So what do? What's the approach? Who do we look to? So like I said, we spent the week looking at God through Moses. And if you're wondering why Moses, here's why. Over the course of the week, we came to the conclusion that this word reemergence, our theme, reemergence, is really a lot like a second chance. That's what a reemergence is. Like, you know those moments where you get a new lease on life, and some things go back to the way that they were before, but some things are going to be very, very different from this moment forward. And we get another chance at doing something better than we had done it before. Have you ever had an experience like that? Most of us have. And so we studied Moses because outside of King David, I can't really think of another faith leader who needed a second chance more than Moses. But if you don't know his whole story, that might actually surprise you. Like, Moses, the most famous prophet ever, the guy that parted the Red Sea and freed the Israelites from Egypt, yeah, that Moses was not always faithful to God. He wasn't always faithful to God, and he didn't always know what to do either. See, in Moses' early life, there was this evil Pharaoh in Egypt, which is like a king, who had all the male babies that were Israelites, children of Israelites. They had them murdered. And so naturally, like I think any of us would be with something like that going on, Moses' mother was terrified for the fate of her son. And so she sent him down the river, like the Nile River, which is massive, in a basket, just hoping for the best. And what ultimately ends up happening is that Pharaoh's daughter herself finds the basket floating, recognizes that it's a Hebrew child in the basket, and says, well, I can't just let the baby float down the river. So she takes the baby out of the river, brings it into the actual like royal residence, and they decide, well, we need to find a Hebrew woman to help raise a Hebrew baby. And they hire Moses' mother, like without knowing. I mean, God is up to some crazy stuff in this situation. But that's a wild thing, so how did it pan out? How did it all work out with this Hebrew boy growing up with this king that wanted him dead? We learn in Exodus 2, second chapter of the book, that this prophet that God will eventually call kills somebody, like as in murder, homicide, straight up kills somebody. And after he gets caught, he runs away. Like Moses is literally on a murderer on the run from the law, like an old Western movie or something, like he's on the lam. And it's just crazy because that's not what we think about when we think of Moses. If you only know the big stories about his life, this might surprise you. But it's an important part of his backstory. And so I have to start wondering when I hear this, what does God think of this Israelite boy raised by a Pharaoh and the Pharaoh's household to become an exiled murderer? What does God think of him? Well, if you don't know, Moses' people, the Israelites, they were these tired and weary slaves living in Egypt, and Scripture says that God was deeply concerned for them. He cared, he wanted to give them a way out, which is where Moses, the exiled, adopted son of Pharaoh, turned murderer, comes into play in this whole situation. Moses is out with a flock of sheep in the area where he'd been living in this area called Medina. And the voice of God speaks to him, and it comes out of a bush that's on fire, which, like, obviously had to make Moses think he was crazy. We would all think we were crazy if we heard voices coming out of a fire bush. But he wasn't. He wasn't crazy. It was God. And after he took a minute and accepted that and realized, hey, I'm being spoken to by God right now, the God of my people, the Scripture says this in Exodus 3, 5 through 11. Exodus 3, 5 through 11 says, "Do not come any closer," the Lord warned. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, "I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land that flows with milk and with honey, a land where the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You, Moses, must lead my people out of Egypt. And then Moses says this in verse 11. But Moses protested to God, who am I? Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? That verse punches me in the gut every single time that I read it, because Moses looks at God and says, who am I? Like, why on earth would I be credentialed? Would I be qualified? What on me? He's just confused and just taken aback. And why should I be the one to bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He's so overcome by the thought. And I imagine in this moment, he's overcome by the thought of all he's done. He knows what waits for him in Egypt because he knows he killed somebody there and was exiled. And so I imagine he's sitting there thinking through all he's done, of who he is. And when he sits there and he thinks back on his own life and he processes all of his talents and all of his experience and all that, the only thing he can think to say back to God is, who am I? Why me? Why would you ever call me? I'm not good enough. See, I don't know if that resonates with you, but it gets me. It hits me in the heart when I hear Moses say that. Because when God calls you to something, tell me if you've had this experience. When God calls you to something, do you do that whole thing that's like, who, me? Little old me? When you feel God calling you to step in and serve the kingdom in a certain way? I've definitely done that. I've absolutely been in that position. But see, Moses is being unfair to himself in this moment. Moses is being unfair. Like, who am I? Well, Moses, you're the only Israelite who knows Pharaoh personally. In fact, he's like a brother to you. I mean, you know your people, you know the Egyptians. Who could be more perfect for this job? You've been created for this moment. And on top of all that, God then says in verse 12, God answered, I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. He says, look, I'm already telling you that you're going to get them free, and you're going to be right back on this mountain worshiping me with those people because I am with you. Even in the midst of all he'd done. Even in the midst of all his skills and his abilities, since he knew Pharaoh and the Egyptians well, aka even in the middle of the good and the bad that Moses had done in his life, God was confident that he was the man for the job. Moses himself, however, was not confident. But God was. Why? Well, first, because God clearly saw something in Moses that he couldn't see in himself. He had a bigger plan in mind. But also, God knew that he would be with Moses the entire time. God knew that with him, Moses would have the strength and the ability to do whatever. And even still, even after that, Moses has so many doubts. He questions God at every turn. He follows up this conversation with 5 objections to God. At first, he comes back and says, what am I supposed to say to the Israelites? Like, do I just go and yell, hey, we're free now? Like, no, okay. What if they ask your name? A God is supposed to have a name. Shouldn't they know who they're worshiping? Okay, well, if not that, what if they don't believe me? What if I just come and tell them all this stuff and they think I'm loony? Like, what about then? Okay, if not that, then here's the deal. I'm not eloquent. I'm not good at speaking. I don't know how to compel these people. And after all these objections, after all this giving it back to God and not wanting to go, Moses finally just plain says, Lord, please send someone else. Just send someone else. I don't want to do it. But at every turn, God answers his concern. After every objection, he answers his concern. He even did it in a way where they were like having this, almost like this little committee, and they were working it out together about, like every time Moses brings up a point, God and him basically come up with a solution together. Like, I'm not eloquent. Well, your brother Aaron is, so he'll speak. Or what if they don't believe me? Tell them this. Like they work out this whole response about how Moses is going to do that. And I think that's a beautiful image of faith. But more than that, with every concern and with every fear and every lack of confidence, and every time he brings up something wrong that he did in the past, God is right there for Moses and answers him and says, I will be with you. It's the core of what each response boils down to. I will be with you. And it becomes this phenomenal turning point in this story where Moses, who's shaken and feeling probably a bit more than crazy, or more than a bit crazy, he comes down from this mountain and he goes to his father-in-law, who he had been living with, tell him that he's leaving, and he heads back to Egypt to see his people and to free his people. And see, I can only imagine, I don't know about you, I can only imagine the people, how it would have felt for them as they saw Moses reemerge, especially those who knew him before he was exiled. They see him coming back into Egypt. Can you imagine what they would have felt? This guy that killed somebody wants to walk back in here? I mean, that's the thing, though, is I can only imagine what they were thinking, seeing him for the first time in decades, but he wasn't the same man that left Egypt. He was a new, completely and totally reshaped by God man. And not only that, but this time, God was literally with him while he was in Egypt. Like God's actual presence was with him. And so the question, after all of that, after examining all that scripture, the question is actually pretty simple for us. It's, can you imagine that? Can you imagine walking back into a life that you had to leave? But you do it with the full confidence of knowing God is by your side as you do so. Can you imagine that? That feeling, knowing God is with us no matter what we've done. And especially when we need a second chance. God is with us. That idea is what we spent a whole week learning and getting deep with at camp. Our kids got to spend an entire week learning, hearing, feeling, and knowing that no matter what they had done, and no matter what chances they need in life, or second chances they need in life, God was with them and calling to them to something high in their life. And so what a week it was. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how important it is to show this truth to the next generation about God's love for them and constant presence in their life. That a gracious God loves them and is always with them. And that right there, if I had to summarize it, is why I think camp is important. Like getting to live that truth is no small thing. And I think it has a great and important effect on our teens knowing these truths about God. And getting to spend a week learning them, it makes an immeasurable difference in their lives. But the thing is this, I'd rather let them tell you that than me. I'd rather let our teens tell you how camp affects them than me. See, it's one of my goals to always elevate the voices of our teens anytime I get the opportunity to be on this stage. Like, I always ask my teens for their views and their opinions when I speak on anything, and I try and include it in my sermons every time. Even if it's a sermon that doesn't have anything to do about the youth group, I always want their voices involved when I speak. But this week, I figured you need more than that. I just want you to hear from them directly. So I asked a few of our teens 3 questions about camp and the effect that it has on them. And I think there's a lesson and something, honestly, to strive for in their answers. So in each of these questions that I asked the teens, I heard a theme in their responses. And particularly, some of the themes get mixed up with different responses. I hear each theme in each response. But if you listen close, I think camp shows us the things that we should be striving for in our normal faith walks. And I think in the middle of that, we're going to hear about 3 themes that our teens are trying to tell us about faith and the type of faith that they learn and they experience at camp. So let's listen to the first question I asked them.
I go to camp because it's just such a wonderful opportunity for me to see old friends that I haven't seen in a while and to grow closer to not only those friends but also to God. And it gives me an opportunity to meet new mentors and hear new speakers and get new perspectives about the Bible and about the Lord that I haven't heard before, and I really enjoy it.
I like going to camp because I love seeing my friends that I haven't seen in a while, and I think it really helps me grow stronger in my faith.
Why do I go to camp? I go to camp because it's a place where I can enjoy myself, also where I can fellowship with other people, and really just to escape from reality. And it's like gives me a break. So, yeah.
And I also go to camp because I feel it's an environment where I can be myself and where people respect me for me.
I go to camp to grow with people and to build my relationship with God.
Why do you go to camp? I go to camp because I haven't been in 6 years, and so when the youth group wanted me to come, I was so happy. And so I go to camp because I love the singing, and I just love everything about it. And I love how I feel welcomed.
The reason I go to camp is to go and rekindle my relationship with God, as well as go and reconnect with friends I haven't seen in a while, really just rekindle that relationship with them as well. It really is just a powerful place when it comes to relationships, not only with God, but with the people that make up the camp.
The reason that I go to CFBC is because I think it's a good opportunity to get away from distractions like technology, friends, drama, just everyday things that we don't really think about. And at CFBC, you kind of are in nature and you can reconnect with God and find your center again. And then when you go back to your everyday life, you can kind of have a new mindset, a fresh start. So it's kind of like you're recharging your battery. It's fun.
So I go to camp. At first it was because everyone had gone before me, my sister, stuff like that. I was like, oh, I gotta go. But eventually it went from that to just the people there, the Capiros, some of the friends I made there. It's just great.
So I don't know what you heard in there. Like I said, I can hear themes in each of our teens' responses. And so I don't know what you heard the most in there. I heard lots of things about friends, and I heard lots of things about it's a chance to get away and escape from technology and all these awesome things. But what I heard the most in those answers, I heard our teens saying, we go to camp because it's a special place. There were several responses, if you heard, that started with camp is a place where fill in the blank. And it's a different fill in the blank for each of our students, but it comes back to this idea that it is an important place. And places matter a lot, actually. If you don't believe me, think back to a specific place that meant a lot to you in your past. It might be a childhood home or where you went to school, maybe even your own Bible camp. There's some people in here who are thinking about their own Bible camp that they grew up at right now. Now, I want you to imagine that you actually had the chance to go back to that place today. Would you feel anything? I mean, most of us would. That feeling of longing and nostalgia would be strong for most of us. But why? It's because important things happen at important places in our lives. And those things and those places form deep, deep memories that ultimately go on to shape who we are. So I think that you know that places are important. And I think at the end of the day, we all need a place. We need a place we can look back to as a foundational part of who we are and where we got to, how we grew up. But the trick is this. A place is never, ever really just a place. It's the place and everything that goes with it, which usually means the people that are in that place. And you probably heard that in that last answer too. I bet you hear it in this one along with some other things. So let's listen to this question.
My favorite part about camp is singing, especially, and probably when we do group activities, because when we do group activities, there's no one left alone, and we're all together, and we just have fun.
My favorite part about camp is meeting new people and making friends and the zip line.
My favorite part about camp is group activities because you're interacting with other people, you're stepping outside your comfort zone, and you just get to enjoy yourself and be who you truly are.
My favorite part about camp is really just being able to separate myself from the norm of society and being able to spend time with all my friends in a very unique place where I know I can grow. And I love going to camp because I leave always happy, and I've not had a single time that I've gone and left unhappy.
Honestly, I think that the best parts of camp are doing all the little things like our cabin divas at night that spiral into conversations that we never knew that we needed to have. Things like doing our campfire devos and singing with everyone in there and going back to see family, not just some random friends that you make. It's really fantastic.
So my favorite part about camp, there's a lot of things really, but I'd have to say it's definitely the people there that make it, because you can go to any old summer camp, but if you don't enjoy going or people don't make it fun, what's the point? People there are definitely the reason.
My favorite part about camp is seeing people that I haven't seen in a really long time and getting to know people better and making new friends. But in a very close second would be the worship, because it's just such a personal and simultaneously communal experience to just hear so many of your peers worshiping in such a way that is at camp.
My absolute favorite part of camp is when we all come together for worship and we just sing. I love hearing us sing because our voices together just sound so calming, and I just love hearing it, and just being in each other's presence when we sing it is just really amazing.
And I hear a lot of things in that answer too about what is your favorite part about camp? Because yes, we all need a place. We all need a place. But did you hear how many of the teens said something about camp that's their favorite that has to do with people? Like, I heard them say things from seeing old friends or group games, or worship was a popular one, and worship at camp really is something. It's hard to describe how good it is. Or even cabin devos or whatever it may be. But all of those things at the end of the day come back to doing things with other people. And ultimately, to quote Derek Cunningham, it's definitely the people that make it. And so I love that response. Every one of their answers, it's either their favorite because they get to do something with the people they love, or it's the people themselves. So we need a place, and we need a people. But a place is really nothing without people. I mean, we need desperately a group of folks in our lives that love us and care deeply for us, or would go out of their way for us, and all those other things. In short, we need community. And if you've been around Northwest more than 12 seconds, you've probably heard us say that from this stage before, but it's so true. We desperately need community. And at camp, we get this concentrated dose of like super community, and it's infectious. I mean, it is infectious, the community that we experience there. I would venture to say it is a glimpse of what God wants from our lives, and maybe even a glimpse of what heaven might be like. I really think that. Community, deep community, is one of our greatest needs, and it's something that we should prioritize in our lives. Camp reminds us of that, and it teaches us that. But above all, there's one thing I think that ties camp together, so let's listen one last time.
I think CFBC is an important experience for us. Because we all have different stories and we all have different backgrounds, and hearing each other's differences can be inspiring and we can relate to them. So I think us teens really need that togetherness.
CFBC is important to our youth group because many people need a break, and CFBC is really where you can just enjoy yourself and be who you are and meet new people, fellowship with other people. You can also like find who you are when it comes to devos, campfires, and people share their stories and you can relate to that.
Because it helps grow a community.
I feel like CFBC is an important experience for our youth group because we get to tell them about our experiences that we had, and so when they get a chance to go, they can experience what we experienced, like the love, the kindness, and the togetherness.
CFBC is such an important experience for our youth group because it gives a lot of younger kids a good opportunity to get closer with the other people in our youth group, which I think is kind of hard when there's such large age gaps between our youngest and our oldest. But at camp, at CFBC, we get such a unique opportunity to be close with everybody with like flower fights, water balloons, and just really fun and lighthearted activities. And you also get an opportunity to mentor younger people in your youth group and generally just make a lot more friends and get closer in our youth group.
So CFBC is important for our youth group because it's not just us going there. It's multiple different youth groups, multiple people from different walks of life. So Bay Area goes, their youth minister, Robbie John, he's there. When he teaches, it's normally something different from what, Casey, George, someone would do. And there's other people, there's the Capiros, of course, but it's just, you feel closer to God because he's talking you through different people who have different ideas of what it means to them.
Since the event alone helps new faith blossom as campers come out of their shell over the course of the event.
I think that camp is a super important part of our youth group and that we need to go there every summer because I think it's the best place that everybody gets to grow in their faith. Don't get me wrong, SunQuest is great and all these other events, but there really is no place like camp. So being able to go there and grow in God's faith is, it's number one. And I think camp is the best place for that. As simple as that.
Man, I put Dustin last because he really summed it up well there. Because we've got places and we've got people, all these things that we get to love and experience at camp. And like I said, I heard one more theme in their responses about camp as I was listening to these videos. And for all the water balloon fights and for all the flower fights and dance parties and dress-up nights and everything else that we did, I was so impressed when I heard our teens answer to the question of why camp is important. Because did you hear it? Our teens think camp is important because they see the people in their lives, they see that it's an important place, but ultimately they recognize that it all helps them grow with God. They recognize, they say with their own voices, they recognize that their faith grows because of these experiences. And Dustin summarized it up best at the end there when he said, that's really what it's all about, plain and simple, it's a place where we can grow with God. They talked about hearing from new voices and deep worship and going into the Bible in depth. You heard them talk about the presence of God and a sense of longing for Him. They talked about being forced to grow in their faith. These are things that our own teens recognize as important about camp. They know that in the end, it all boils down to Jesus. For all the fun, it all boils down to Jesus. And that the rest is great, but at the end of the day, it's all about God. And folks, ultimately, that is your lesson this morning. It's that camp has something to teach all of us. That we all need a place that we can call our own, where we feel at home and we feel loved. We all need a people and a community in our lives who can pick us up when we're weak, who can encourage us and have fun with us, help us grow close to God. And more than anything else, we need a God who's told us that He'll be with us every step of the way as we go through life, no matter what we've done. And so I'm so thankful that our teens get to experience the kingdom of God at a place like Central Florida Bible Camp. I am. But I hope none of you leave here today without realizing that these aren't just needs and experiences for teenagers. These are needs for each and every one of us. And so I hope you make this a priority in your own faith. And I hope you'll let us walk with you in this process. Because if you need a place to call your own, Northwest would love to be that place. If you need a people to love you and walk through life alongside you, all you have to do is look around this room. We would love to. We would love to be those people for you. And ultimately, if you need a faith or if you need a reemergence of your faith and you want to know how to walk through this crazy life with the confidence that comes with knowing that God is with you, we want that for you too. We want to walk that path together. So, take the example from our teenagers. If you've sat here this morning and you realize you need a little slice of camp in your life, we agree. All of us do. And we're here for you. If you'd like to respond today, you can do so on our app or on our website under the prayer request form, or you can grab one of us as we dismiss today. Let's sing as we conclude.